So the unconscious. Now, negative emotions of David Hawkins start at the bottom with shame and humiliation, which is low self-esteem. And then you've got guilt and blame, despair, regret, grief and regret, fears and anxieties, craving and desire or greed, anger and pride. When we go above that, we start to come into more positive emotions, but we're still not over the top. We've got to get to 540. So remember, David always said that real healing, in other words, healing of the mind, only occurs at 540 or above when you have unconditional love. In other words, you have no problems going on between the left and the right sides of our minds. So we know that those negative emotions manifest physically or biochemically through the hypothalamus, which create modulations in the regulating chemicals in the body. And these affect interneuronal communication of all cells. We now know that neurotransmitters are in all locations in the body and not just in nerves. It was thought they will make nerves talk to each other, and they do, but they also talk directly to cells. So now they prefer to call them neuropeptides, which covers hormones and neurochemicals and neurotransmitters, because there are receptor sites in every cell in the body for practically every neurotransmitter and hormone, which means that when your neurotransmitter, when your brain is sad, your cells are sad, because you're reflecting that low level, say, of serotonin, of the sadness, into other cells in your body. So your whole body becomes sad. And this applies particularly with the immune system. So the immune system, you imagine the immune system feeling sad, it's not going to work. And the same thing, one thing when you pick up a bug, is usually people say, well, you're a bit run down, aren't you? And what have you been thinking about? When you wheedle it out of people, you say, well, actually, I've had this problem. And the problem's been going round and round in your mind, and it alters your brain chemicals, down goes your serotonin, and the immune system gets sad, your immune system gets depressed on road. So many of these unconscious emotions are more survivalist, as we talked, and they restrict our conscious awareness and development. Now the brain. Now remember, when we talk about the mind, we're talking about our thinking consciously and subconsciously, okay? And the brain is where it operates through, okay? It is not where it comes from. So when we talk about conflicts between the left and the right brain, we don't talk about actually the brain, we talk about the mind. Conflict between the left and the right mind, which is operating through the brain. So we see it as a measuring device rather than the actual, it's like the computer. So you can say, well, the computer says this, but it doesn't, of course. It says what you put into it, the information, so you've got to program it in first of all. So it's what you put into that computer, what will come out of it. Now, brain cells need three things to survive, as to some extent we all do, but the three things of survival are really quite important here because these are fundamentals. So the first one is oxygen. Now we know that oxygen is vital for producing ATP in the body and oxygenation pathways. Without oxygen we couldn't aerobically function, okay? And we couldn't do our oxidative pathways. But the problem is with oxidation is it creates free radicals in 5% of oxidative reactions in the body, normal ones in our mitochondria and oxidation mothers, produce superoxide as a result. So it's like a byproduct, and that superoxide has to be got rid of, okay, or by a free radical quencher. And the normal way the body does this is using the enzymes, SOD, superoxide dismutase, and catalase. That's the favoured pathway to getting rid of free radicals. But if those are not available or are not working properly, we use antioxidants. So antioxidants are particular nutrients which can take on that extra electron and usually hand it on like a hot potato that you're going to have at lunchtime. So if I give you a hot potato, you get rid of it fast, don't you? Because you've become a hot potato. You know, and this is the trouble with free radical quenchers or antioxidants, is they become free radicals themselves. So you get rid of it as fast as you can to the next one, and eventually the potato will cool as you go around the room, okay? And someone at the end will say, I want an extra electron, thanks. So there's a chain, and I'm going to teach you what those chains are. So oxygen is good. Without oxygen we couldn't survive, but at the same time, eventually those free radicals, if we don't get rid of them, will make our oils particularly go rancid. Our unsaturated fatty acids will go rancid. They hydroxate. So oxygen. Second one is glucose. Again, absolutely brilliant fuel. It's the only fuel really that we can use in our brains, except the brain can use some glutamine. as an amino acid, but it can't use anything else. Do you remember in the last module with the cancer cells only can use glucose. All other cells in our body can use glucose as a fuel, but we can also burn in the Krebs cycle, citric acid, we can burn amino acids and we can metabolize our fats into beta oxidation. So we can bypass that first part, but a cancer cell can't. Do you remember it can't do that? It can only live on glucose, and that's why by restricting glucose input into a person's diet who's got cancer, it's the must. Okay? Most good naturopathic, if you like, physicians who deal with cancer, it's the first thing you've got to get with your cancer patients is off glucose. Okay? Now, glucose, you say, well, that's essential for life. It is. But we're talking about glucose as glucose taking in, which goes zoom, straight across the intestinal wall. And that's in our artificial sugars. So our synthetic sugars, and the worst ones of those are corn starches, corn syrups rather. Okay, corn fructose, high concentration fructose. Anything like that is bad. Okay? So the next thing you do is you get rid of your sugar at home. Okay, now you're going to eat raw potatoes. And you've got to get rid of your sugar now, next one. So you get raw sugar. Okay, you can buy raw sugar, and raw sugar has the B vitamins with it. Okay? If you think about it, every time you have sugar or pure starch, like white flour, okay, you have nothing else. These are called empty calories. Okay? What are you going to do with them? You can burn them for energy. Excellent, burn them for energy. But to burn them for energy, as you know, you've got to have all the B vitamins to spin the Krebs cycle and things, and you've got to have your minerals and so on, your magnesium and so on. So every time you have pure starch or pure glucose or pure syrup, what will happen is you will deplete your body of the B vitamins. Okay, it's not just a game. You will deplete it, or you will store it as fat. It'll convert into fat. Okay. Now you begin to think, well, what was it? Who was it saying they got a patient? Sorry, you missed it. Who just drinks three cans of Coke a day? Who was it? Oh, it was you, Jill, at breakfast. Yes. She was a good lady. She was excellent, wasn't she? In all cases, good diet. She said, I have, good diet. And do you drink alcohol? No, never touch alcohol. What? She didn't drink very much. No. She had 3 cans of Coke a day. Okay, that's small in comparison to what Americans have over a litre, isn't it, on average, every day per man, woman, and child of sodas, as they call them, and most of those are going to be full strength. So one of the biggest selling products in America is a 5-minute energy drink, a 5-hour energy drink. You can pick this up at gas stations and all sorts of places. And of course, after 5 hours, you still want another one. Okay, and it gives you a boost, and it's an energy. And I spotted this in a garage in this country. And I thought, oh, I'll take one of those, and because it says vitamins and amino acids and quick energy fix. And I looked around, and the main ingredient is about 30 ml, I suppose, in a plastic container, which is always a good start, isn't it? Okay, is water. Okay, that's the first thing. The second one was artificial sweetener, potassium aspartate and a saccharin type there. Okay, and then way down the list was a little bit of niacin in there, and the amino acid was taurine. Now this is looking like red, okay, like another drink, okay, energy drink, okay. And then there was B1, B6, and B12, okay, but you can imagine how much was in there because that was right down the bottom of the list. And finally there were preservers in there, and that was it. That's your amino acid, just about called it an amino acid drink, and vitamins, okay. So what you do is you swallow one of those if you want a quick fix. And of course you get the high. Oh, and the other ingredient, vital ingredient I forgot, was caffeine. Okay, so it will give you a quick fix. You've got the caffeine surge and the aspartame, which is what the vitamins and minerals are nothing to do with it. Okay, so that's pure rubbish. Okay, and that's what you do with white sugar and white flour. Is you're going to get pure rubbish. You're going to deplete your body of those vitamins. You're going to want to burn that energy. You will have problems with it. Okay, because you'll deplete all your vitamins. So again, that's something else. Now, in order to get those, that's why. Why do they sell you white flour and white sugar? Is because it preserves it. Why does it preserve it? And because weevils and other things will eat the valuable bits. If you have whole wheat, whole rye, etc., the valuable bits is, of course, not the starch, isn't it? The valuable bits is the vitamins and the oils. The oils are the most valuable thing, really, because the oils are in the seed part, the germ, which gives the new life to the next plant. That's why we eat the seed, because it's got all the enzymes and things in it. So what you do is you take the germ off, take the bran off, and then you sell the flour, because the flour will then last, okay? Because the weevils won't touch it, because there's nothing for them to eat. They won't. And your flour will have a sell-by date, but it won't have when it was made on it, okay? Now, while flour can be not just months, it can be years old, okay? So if it's whole grain, okay, whole meal, or even 81% flour, it'll have the bran and the germ in it. If it's white, which is 70%, it's 70% pure starch, okay? Now, just to make sure, if you've ever seen white flour is actually grey. It's not white. So what do? They bleach it. They add chlorine to it, chlorine products to bleach it. So white flour now looks white because it's been bleached, which has its own problems, okay? When you crack fresh wheat, you've got about a week before the oil goes rancid, okay? So rancid oils are really, really critical, because you'll start to eat them every time your flour, your whole grain flour, is more than a week old. I will guarantee you, in seminars I've done this, and with my patients, I have not yet found a single person who weakens to wheat. I found hosts of people who weaken to flour, but not to wheat. Okay? They've grown wheat from the pyramids, 5,000 years old, and it's sprouted. It's as good as the day it went into the pyramids, okay? Because nature's put a seal around it. Okay? All those oils, everything is intact, but only for 5 days after you've ground it. So if you grind wheat yourself into flour and make bread, you know what bread is about. Okay? We've forgotten what bread is, because we're so used to junk. And all that junk is rancid oils, and you're eating that every day. And you incorporate that into your diet. This is why everybody who weakens to wheat is better when they have white, aren't they? Do you find that? They have wholemeal and they feel awful. You know, within an hour or so you're feeling tired, you're bloated and everything. It's not the wheat, I don't think. I thought it was the lectin in the wheat. I was convinced of it. I don't think it is, because they don't weaken to wheat with the lectin. It's the oils which are rancid. They're falling asleep because of the rancid oils. No wonder you get heavy and stiff and tired. People say, I give up wheat and I feel so much more loose. You know, I've lost that sort of binding down. It's because of the rancid oils. They're hardening up. So don't touch white sugar and white flour, because they're empty calories. They'll go straight to glucose. They'll be digested straight in. And although the brain uses 20 to 25% of all the glucose from the food, it needs glucose, but you want to put it in slowly. Okay? So the slower it is to have whole grains, but to let them dissipate in at a much slower rate than having white or quick fix would be sugar. And the third most important thing for the brain is stimulate it, get it to work. If you don't get it to work, it doesn't work, it dies. So to bring neuronal activity up to threshold in order to get the brain to fire. Disuse leads to a thing called transneural degeneration. So if you don't use the brain, it prunes the neurons that you don't use, and that's it. You know, they go. You can find other connections, which is like if you've forgotten somebody's name, you know, you think about it and you can't get it. Later on, it comes to you, doesn't it? Something clicks, and what we all do, I think, is we go through the alphabet, isn't it? And then suddenly you get to K, oh, it's Keith, you know. You make that click, but it's a roundabout route. It's because you've pruned the neuron that connected that straight up, okay? So you had to do a roundabout route. The memory never goes, okay? It's always there, but you just can't access it, okay? They say that even in Alzheimer's disease, the people still have their memory, okay? And it comes back just before they die, because it's not in the body. It's in the mind, okay? They don't know where the memory is, okay? Nobody actually knows where the memory is. They cut different parts of the brain out, and they can't find it, okay? So if they cut the whole brain out, the question is whether it's there. But it comes back. So if you've got an Alzheimer's patient, and the memory suddenly comes back at them, you know they're about to pop off, okay? Very interesting phenomenon. So disuse will lead to transneural degeneration. So you need to use your brain, and a lot of people we know don't use their brains very much. Especially in homes. So let's have a look at each one of these, because these are really critical to brain functioning. Now, this is the energy pathway, which we all love so much. So this is the acetate, the laminate rather, we use. So we know the first part of energy production here is glycolysis. Okay, that's anaerobic. That doesn't need any oxygen. It's anaerobic. The second part is the citric acid or Krebs cycle, whose job is to produce electrons and protons for the third part in the membrane here, which is the electron transport or oxidative phosphorylation, which does need oxygen. So this is aerobic. So we have two types of energy production, anaerobic and aerobic. So once we cross the mitochondrial membrane, if we like, we're going aerobic. When we're this side of it, we're anaerobic. And it's this pathway, this threshold that we've got to cross between pyruvic acid here and acetyl-CoA here on the inside of the Krebs cycle. This pathway here crossing the two membranes is where most problems occur. Now, why does most problems occur here? Is because we've got a membrane, an outer membrane and an inner membrane. And as I taught you before, what are membranes made of? Lipids, yes, phospholipids. And they're mostly in the neuron case, and in many others. In all cells in the body, they're going to be 50% unsaturated, but in the neuron, they're both unsaturated. Both tails in the phospholipid are unsaturated, which makes them much more vulnerable to oxidation, okay, or going rancid. And if this membrane goes rancid, what can't get across the membrane? Not just the pyruvate, but oxygen can't get into the powerhouse. So you're shutting the whole powerhouse down, the damper on there. You've got the fuel maybe going in, but you've got no air. Okay, so the oxygen. So you get a build-up of oxygen on the other side. You can't get into the mitochondrial membrane. So we need all the protection we can get for the mitochondrial membranes. In other words, these fatty acids in our body, this is where the rancidity occurs. Why does it occur? Because it's high in oxygen. Because that's where the oxygen goes to. Do you get that? Okay. In other words, the areas that go rancid in your body fastest are the areas where there's a lot of oxygen being used. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. Okay. Now, the neuron is the most important one, and particularly the mitochondrial membranes. Okay, so you need a lot of the antioxidant which protects our membranes in the membranes of the mitochondria, and particularly in the neurons. And the third place, which is really, really important, is the eye. Okay, the eye is very high in oxygen, and particularly on the back there, and we will go rancid in our retina. Why? Because the retina has the highest, most specialized phospholipid membranes of anywhere. Both phospholipid tails are DHA, which is 6 double bonds in it. So any oxygen wafting around there will turn your eye very quickly. The screen on the eye will go rancid, and then it will become fuzzy. Okay, so here we see pyruvate going across the membrane to acetyl-CoA. So to get the oxygen from here to here, it has to diffuse by the pressure of oxygen here being greater than here. Okay? If there's more here than here, it'll cross the membrane. If it's around the other way, it won't. Okay? It's simply a matter of pushing it across the membranes. Okay? We learnt in our last module that to carry the pyruvate across to convert to acetyl, we need B1 mainly here, with a little bit of alpha lipoic acid and B2 and B3. But the main nutrient, the cofactor or enzyme here, is B1. Okay? So B1 gets the substrate, the fuel across, but to get the air across, we've got to get it across the membranes. All right? Does that make sense? So you've got to get it across the fatty acid membranes. So when somebody is lacking oxygen, okay, they're not getting it, the chances are either they're not breathing properly, so it could be a mechanical problem within their environment. Okay, they may have fixations in the manubrial sternal joint, thoracics, so that's the job of more the physical locative. Once we got the air into the lung, it then goes across from the pulmonary side into the pulmonary vein in the red cells. The red cells carry it, and the red cells are rich in hemoglobin, and the center of the hemoglobin molecule is iron. Okay? So iron is really important. So the first thing I check with somebody who is hypoxic or lack of oxygen is iron. How do you tell whether you're hypoxic? Probably everybody. Okay, just watch them; they'll start to yawn. Okay, yawning is the first signs of hypoxia. There'll be times when you're hypoxic. There'll be times when you're not hypoxic. You know? Some people are hypoxic all the time. Racehorses are hypoxic all the time. Okay, that's why they puff and pant all the time. Okay, so that they run racehorses in a hypoxic state. Most of us have times of the day when we're hypoxic. Some people get it in the middle of the night, and they wake up with a start, and they say, I wake up every morning about 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes they feel they're suffocating almost, and you say, thank heaven you did, because if you didn't, you'd be dead. Because you would have suffocated. That's why it's telling you, you've got no oxygen, wake up, you're dying. And so they wake up, and then they curse that they've woken up, but in fact it's the best thing they could have done. This is always a sign of hypoxia. So check iron first. The second one that you check is going to be, see if there's strength into oxygen is going to be your functional test. Second thing you're going to test is vitamin B12. So you need all the vitamin B12s. So you start with hydroxycobalamin, okay, that's the raw vitamin B12, okay, and then you check adenosine and methylcobalamin. So remember there's two active coenzymes. If a person strengthens to the coenzyme and not to hydroxy, they probably got a SNP, or in other words, they need the activated form. Okay? If a person strengthens to hydroxy, it usually means they're B12 deficient, okay, in their diet. This would be classically your vegetarians, because they're just not getting enough B12. So remember, the richer sources of B12 are going to be red meats. Lamb being the main one, followed by wild meats. Okay? Things like pheasant, deer, rabbit, and so on. Okay, down the pecking order then will be beef and pork and so on. So B12s. Number 3 is essential fatty acids. Okay? We've got to get these membranes up working. Okay? So you're deficient in the right fatty acids. You've got an accumulation of trans fats, oxidized fats, hydrogenated vegetable oils in your cell membranes. The only way you can get rid of bad fats is to flood the body with good fats. Okay? You can't make a bad fat good. You've got to replace it. It has to be cleaved out or hooked out by phospholipase A enzyme, which you remember I taught you that one is, and that's an enzyme that's selenium dependent. Okay? So you need selenium, and the best source of selenium is watercress. Okay, so the watercress is very good. And lastly, to protect and get the oxygen out, the permeability, you've got to get it out of the red cells into the tissues across there. You need the permeability factor. And the permeability factors are known as vitamin P, or they used to be, we call them bioflavonoids now. So that's in the pith of the lemon, not the lemon squirt, unfortunately. But they first identified this in rutin in buckwheat. Okay, but now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different bioflavonoids. But the most common one for us is citrus pith. So the skin of lemons, oranges, grapefruits, and so on is a really good source. All plants have bioflavonoids, but the citrus have higher ones. So we call that the vitamin C complex. So in other words, vitamin C with all the bioflavonoids and things. So you will get that from your lemon and your potato juice. So you'll get your oxygen in much better. So now everybody's going to be buying potatoes left, right, and centre. We see a boom in the potato industry. Okay, so because everybody will try it, and you try it, and you'll say, "Oh, that's not bad. I like what you said," and you miss it if you don't have it. Okay, it's just the same as making your own bread from freshly ground wheat. When you taste that, you will not go back to bread again. Okay, I can guarantee, because you'll say, "This is what bread should taste like." Okay, and if you make it freshly ground, in other words, the wheat hasn't gone rancid and it's whole grain, you'll say, well, there's a substance to this. Your 6'4" powerlifting boy ate 3 slices of this. It's like having 3 Weetabix, you know. Can you do it? And he managed to get 3 slices. Normally 1 slice is enough. Thin slice of wholemeal bread, proper wholemeal bread is pretty filling. 2 is a difficult, but he managed 3, didn't he, somehow, which is good. And your younger boy, who's 17, he's also 6'4". He poo-pooed. One of the happiest things he had, wasn't it, in his life, was when Jill did a kinesiology course and was told that he couldn't have brown bread. He was delighted, so he's had white bread ever since. Okay? But now white bread is banished from the house, and he's actually eating the whole meal, and he's not moaning about it, is he? No, he's actually had 2 slices yesterday. He was that hungry. You'll soon, if you have hunger and you eat that, you'll eat it, but you actually begin to chew it and you taste it and you think, gosh, and you know, it's different. It's what bread used to be, called the staff of life. So it is the staff of life. Okay, so that's a little diagram which we did again last time about the effects of essential fatty acids. Now I'm going to quickly flick and show you the fatty acid. This you don't have a copy of, okay? But you can. I will give it to you if you email me, or I'll email it on to Clive, and you can pick it up off the website if you like. It's just something I put together because so many people ask about this, about good fats and bad fats. All right. So I'm going to move that because it is fundamental to neural chemistry and ultimately to how we think and our aging. So heart attack victims should opt for the Mediterranean diet, this says. But go easy on oily fish. Well, we said this a year ago, didn't we? Because of the mercury content and things. But it is suggested, it suggests survivors, that's of heart attacks. And this is really quite interesting when I put this together. There are 1.5 million Britons who have suffered a heart attack. 1.5 million. 1 million of those are males, which with a bit of simple maths means 500,000 are females. Okay, so it's more of a male problem. Do you know that 80% of physicians die of heart disease? This is quite serious, okay? So understanding about hearts is more serious than what you imagine, because probably most people will eventually get heart problems. And most of this is preventable by following the right diet, and the right oils and the right vitamins, particularly the vitamin Bs and so on. So this is really important stuff. And then they turn around here, the draft guidance updates existing advice issues. It suggests survivors should consume more bread. That's got to be the biggest joke out. The more bread they have, the more rancid fats, the worse they get altogether. Especially white bread, because it's going to be empty calories, no Bs. Fruit, vegetables, and fish, but less meat, with plant oils replacing butter and cheese. Okay? Now, cheese is one of the best sources of proteins and good oils, providing you have unpasteurized. Okay? Now, the great thing is we can't get unpasteurized milk very easily, but you can get unpasteurized cheese at most supermarkets. Eat unpasteurized cheese. Okay? It gives you good sources of oils, good sources of protein. Okay? Wonderful for people who need the protein. No problems at all with anybody being weak on it. It's pasteurized cheese which is the problem. Okay? Not unpasteurized cheese. Have that, that's absolutely fine for you, but don't have pasteurized. Okay? Butter, give up butter. What? It's the best source of oils there are. But again, remember the unsaturated oils go rancid if you leave it out too long. So keep it in the fridge until you bring it out and so on. But they're suggesting replacing that with margarine, presumably, and vegetable oils. What sort of vegetable oils? Oh, so the person who reads this goes to the shop and buys vegetable oil. We know that, but probably most of them, when you say about oils, they say, oh, yes, I have olive oil. Well, olive oil is all right for red people, but it's not much good for blues or grains. Okay? So if you remember the types of oils that your body is, you mustn't cook with the ones. So people who are red, olive oil, cold pressed olive oil is fine for them. But if they cook it, then they're going to change it, aren't they? So they must never cook with olive oil. Okay, so you can't win. So an unsaturated oil, it has a double bond. And if it's a single double bond, it's called a monounsaturated, and it has more than one, it's called a polyunsaturated, all right? So the more polyunsaturated, more double bonds, the more it can be replaced with oxygen in there. So the more vulnerable. Now you see it's got a kink where the double bond is. There's a space in the hydrogens here, so it kinks like that. Okay, so it's got a kink in it. Now when you heat this oil, this part turns round and it goes straight. And that acts like a saturate because it's a straight line here of carbons, and that acts exactly the same as a saturate. It's harder, higher melting point. Where we've got a CH3 or a methyl group is where we count the end of the oil. So if the first double bond is in the third position here, it's called an omega-3 oil. If it's in the sixth space, guess what it's called? An omega-6, good. Okay. And if it's in the ninth position, it's called an omega-9, good, right. But this one is called a trans fat because it's gone straight. Okay. Now this occurs when you heat it above mostly 100 degrees centigrade. Okay, so some of the oils are simple oils and some of them are more complex. Saturates have no double bonds. So saturates are fine. You can't damage those by heating. Okay, so sometimes there's a role for saturates in our diet like coconut oil and so on.